Enjoy local voices. Enjoy local opinions. All on one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts, featuring some of the DC area's best personalities, pundits, and provocateurs. Earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts you love instantly. With new programs being added every week, don't hesitate. Download Podcast DC now for free. Available in the App Store or in Google Play. Podcast DC. Listen local.
Mean Old Lion Media presents Corner Table Talk.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Brad Johnson, your host here at Corner Table Talk, welcoming you. New York City, my hometown, is on the comeback trail. Quarantines lifted, blue skies and warm temperatures, the vibrant streets of the city have sprung back to life. Restaurants, bars, and clubs are welcoming back customers and breathing a huge sigh of relief that the worst of the horrors of COVID are safely in the rear view. If you're thinking of a trip to New York City, and why wouldn't you be, and wanting to know about some of the places you should visit, my guest today has some spots you should definitely put on your list. We're focusing on the comeback of New York City, or maybe in the words of LL Cool J, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my peers, putting suckers in fear. David Rabin is a name known to almost everyone in the New York hospitality industry. He is a former lawyer, and a graduate of Tufts undergrad and Columbia Law School. To use a little basketball lingo, he has been putting up numbers since he and former business partner Will Regan opened the ultra cool Rex in 1990, one of the first to help establish the meatpacking district as a hot neighborhood for nightlife and high-end retail, doing for it what Sex and the City did for the Cosmopolitan. A string of places since, which included a club in Moscow, that's right, as in Russia, and I visited there with David. We'll talk a little bit about that. David recently added several new venues to his existing roster in Manhattan, while also continuing his long-standing relationship with the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas. In Soho, the ever-popular watering hole with a view and a pool, Jimmy at what was formerly the James Hotel, now called Modernhaus, where he is also a partner in the new restaurant there, Veranda, which looks absolutely beautiful. There's American Bar and one of the hottest and most innovative concepts in the city, focusing on the cuisine of India, Sona. So we're going to talk about that too. And by the way, Eater New York listed both Veranda and Sona recently in the top 10 of the hottest places in the city. So David has that touch. He's also a partner at the Midtown Power Spot, the Lambs Club, and I've never been there and not seen a mogul or two or three in that room. David is former president of the New York City Nightlife Association. I've known him since the 80s and am honored to count him among my closest friends. There is no one with better people skills, his ability to remember names, details, and his enthusiasm for connecting people, I think, are a big part of his secret sauce. And clearly, he is someone a lot of people want to be in business with. So David is a loving husband to his beautiful wife, Nikki, the proud dad of his handsome and smart son, Tyler, and a dog named Joey Mack, which caught me off guard because I did not know David Rabin was a dog lover until I saw pictures of that little cuddly thing. Let's dive in with David Rabin. David, welcome to Corner Table Talk. Did I miss anything?
Thank you so much, Brad. No, I think that was pretty good, except that I met Nikki. I met Nikki at the Cellar. So that's a little history there.
That's right.
At your goodbye dinner for LA.
Wow.
Oddly enough.
I did not know that was the event.
Well, I saw her there and then had to ask Chris Halliburton like 600 times if he'd introduce me, and he finally did.
You know, I discovered Nikki, right? You do know that.
What else? Why would that surprise me, Brad?
I was walking to Memphis one day, a restaurant that we opened on Columbus Avenue, and Nikki was working in a clothing store at the front desk a couple of doors down, and I walked past and did a little moonwalk backwards, and I said, you should be at the front desk of our restaurant. And the rest is history, as they say. So anyway, we start off things, David, with short order questions. So I'm going to fire a few at you, get your response.
I'll do my best.
Okay. What is in heavy rotation on your playlist, Mr. Rabin?
Most of the places that we run, I like to say they're based on Tribe Called Quest. and things that would flow from that, either before or after. So, a lot of Marvin Gaye, a lot of her, a lot of D'Angelo. I like a guy named Tom Misch a lot, UK dude. So those are sort of, 4 or 5 of the bass people. Al Green. Our first car ride out in the Hamptons, those 2 songs never are not on my playlist. The Staple Singers and
Shaka,
and early Shaka. Yeah. Those are on. Yeah. Those are to use a bad pun, those are staples of my playlist. And every time they come on, I honestly think back to your car and driving around and that weekend that we spent out east.
Yeah, that was a blast, man. And your places are known for music, and I know you have a hand in that. I know you're an avid tennis player. Who would you most like to spend a couple of hours with on the court?
I would probably say I would love to meet Naomi Osaka, and I have met Serena once and was very impressed with her. And I'm constantly amazed by Federer's grace under pressure. So, they're very obvious answers, unfortunately. But these seem to be people who are really, really thinking in addition to what they're doing. And then the humbleness of Nadal is crazy to me. The guy's won 13 French Opens, and he's constantly seen as the underdog, which is kind of bizarre to me. He's one of the greatest in history.
And seems to live a pretty simple,
he does
reclusive life.
Very exactly. But that's the only thing through the pandemic, I would say, that, the 2 nice things, if there's any 3 things that I could say through the pandemic, were a lot of family time with Nikki and Ty, Joey Mack, as you mentioned, and who's named after my dad, and named after our nephew who passed away, and playing a lot of tennis. It was a comeback period.
Good for you, David. What are you wearing on your feet these days?
Always sneakers, my man.
I know.
I got some cool multicolored Pumas that I don't know where they came from, and some cool Y3s, and I like to wear these Rod Lavers. So I'm trying never. Part of quitting law was to not wear ties and not wear shoes. So I'm doing my best.
Both. Yeah.
I'm trying.
Are you lacing them up these days, or still untied?
It depends it depends on the purpose. Obviously, tennis, they're tied. Walking to Starbucks, maybe not.
All right. Favorite New York City restaurant or bar that you are not a partner in?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to say, for a restaurant, I'm going to say Odeon or Raoul's, because I feel like they feel like real New York, as does Barney Greengrass. But I don't know if people think of that as a restaurant, but take me there for lox and bagels.
If you like Bialys.
I'm as happy as you could be. And I think the coolest bar in New York for me is Attaboy, which used to be Milk and Honey, down on the Lower East Side. And I'm pretty excited because I worked with those guys in Vegas, and we're doing 2 projects with them in New York. But it's a 22-person bar on the Lower East Side. You wouldn't even know it was there, and probably the most innovative cocktails in New York, if not the country.
Wow, tough to get in.
Not if you know Brad Johnson.
Yeah, that'll get you far. All right, the trait that you most value in a friend?
Consistency. There's just, as we get older, I think, although what's been nice is that I recently have met some new people and it's harder to do as we get older. As you know, our time is constrained and stuff. I've met some really interesting, cool new people with all the openings in the last year that I think will become longtime friends. But there's a certain ease and comfort. I'm still in touch, as I think you are, because I know a lot of your old friends, with people I went to middle school, or at that time we called it junior high. And especially during the pandemic, there's been a lot of comfort in those old friendships and that level of trust that you have with people, that even if you're razzing each other, it's all done with love and respect.
It's true, isn't it?
It really is.
That comfort zone, man, is irreplaceable
And fun.
Yep.
People pull stuff out, you're like, how do you even remember that?
All right. Speaking of memories, your fondest childhood memory around food?
Fondest around food? It's funny that I'm in this business, Brad, because I don't, I was maybe Sara Lee and Haagen-Dazs. I don't know. My dad, my fondest memory would really probably be my dad doing barbecues in the backyard, because that meant we got to have a catch in between him flipping the burgers or flipping the steaks. So I have extremely clear memories of being in our backyard in Syosset doing, Saturday or Sunday barbecue and having a catch with my dad. So, not glamorous food, but certainly one of my warmest and strongest memories.
Yeah, man, I can relate to that. That catch with dad is
the best.
That stays stuck in your memory.
So I can't watch Field of Dreams. I mean, it's an auto cry.
Can't get through it.
Auto cry. Dad, you want to have a catch?
All right. Sports legends. Who, past or present, would you most like to host at an intimate dinner party?
I would say it would have to be Muhammad Ali. Just the more I learn about him, and the more I watch archival footage and stuff, and the things he said, I think I'd most want to sit with him. I mean, my other sort of hero growing up were my dad's heroes, so it was like Willie Mays, people like that, but Sandy Koufax. But yeah, for me, I think it would probably be Ali. I did get the kick of meeting one of my childhood heroes in person for a moment when I got to meet Joe Namath, which was completely surreal, because when I was 8, he won the Super Bowl, and then I randomly met him here on the Upper West Side. But I'll stick with Ali.
That's a good one. So when you met Joe Willie, did you just walk up to him on Amsterdam Avenue and say, "Hi, I'm David Rabin"? How did that happen?
Well, I would normally do that dumb shit, right? No, I would, but no, it was the most perfect way to meet somebody. Danny Errico, who was the original founder and owner of Equinox. We used to play touch football in Central Park back in the 80s and 90s, and so he knew I loved Namath, and I was walking down Amsterdam, and he's like, "Yo, Rabin, come over here." So I walked across the street, and there's some, I really didn't even notice. He's standing near some tall, stooped guy with a bike helmet on, athletic looking guy. And I'm like, "What's up, Danny? What do you need?" And he's like, "I just wanted you to meet my friend Joe here." And I turn around, and there's a guy with sunglasses and a bike helmet. I'm like, "Hi, I'm David." He's like, "Hi, I'm Joe." And I'm like, "Mr. Namath." And he's like, no, it's Joe. I'm like, yeah, you don't understand. I still have your autograph when I was 8, from Hofstra.
Right.
It was not. I was not
that before.
I was not at my coolest.
Tough to be. They're used to that, though.
Not at my coolest. Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much, man, for taking the time today. I'm really honored that you're not doing this podcast from the elliptical machine at Equinox. So thank you for your undivided attention.
Of course,
here.
Sir.
So while we have you, we'll move right into it. This past year and a half, man, has been brutal in so many ways, and we've seen so much that maybe just was brought to the surface as a result of things going on, but certainly COVID and the havoc that it caused, and a lot of New Yorkers fled. At least that's what the newspapers say, and the streets certainly looked quiet. The city looked dire for a little while there, and I know we talked quite a bit during, and it was touch and go. It was you were riding the subways and riding your bike around the city a lot, and the city did not look like the city that we know. So I'm curious with, and I know you had several projects pending, and things had to be put on hold, during the pandemic. But did you ever consider leaving the city? Was that ever a consideration for you?
God, no. I mean, 1,000% not, but for two reasons. I mean, one just, it's, I don't know how you did it, but once it gets in your DNA, it's kind of in your DNA for me. So I've left for short periods of time and not been happy. I mean, I've been happy in that moment, but knowing that I was definitely going back to New York. But also our business is not transportable. So, whatever street cred or, abilities. I'm not a chef. I don't have a transportable skill. My skill set is who I know and our history here in New York and our ability to create a bit of a buzz and to have credibility. And, if I picked up and went to Phoenix or some other city, that might not trail me. And plus there's a lot of people in the similar position in those cities, who've already established those 20, 30-year relationships. So it was never really a consideration. And also, I just never really doubted that New York was going to come back. I mean, everything you said is accurate. It felt very dire. It felt like a bad, like one of those Will Smith, that I can't think of the name of it, the Will Smith movie, when you look around and there's zero people here. It was crazy riding a bike through Times Square a year ago. But, it's funny, not funny, but interesting, like depending on what part of town you're in, even last summer, even when COVID was still raging, there were in the West Village where we have American Bar, or I met someone for dinner in Soho, and then we walked down Spring Street, and I was kind of like, what's going on? I mean, when people were outdoors only at the time. So I think there was a tremendous amount of pent-up demand then, and now we're seeing incredible demand. I think a lot of people our age are not in the city and are coming back in September. But I think people who were in a younger demographic, who didn't necessarily have the means to just leave and go live in a second house in the Hamptons or somewhere, are here and have been going pretty strong.
Yeah. When I thought about that question, David, asking you that, I, of course, reflected back to, my decision to leave the city in '89. And it was, after a rough period in New York, with crack and crime, the economy was, was ish, and it was a rough time. And I just needed the space. I was ready for some warm weather. But New York never, you don't get New York out of your bones, I think, ever. And I still, consider it my hometown.
I keep trying to get you to come back, man.
Yeah.
I need help
around one of your rooms.
Help.
Yeah.
I need help.
I bet you do. But I'm curious, man, you started to kind of answer this question, but I want to go a little bit deeper with it. So you've opened several places, which I want to get into in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. But I'm really curious what kind of energy you're feeling from people coming out now, or are folks just really pent up as the demand just through the roof?
Whatever you're reading, it's more. At Jimmy this past weekend, which was our rooftop pool thing, it was finally, the weather finally broke. It wasn't humid. It wasn't pouring rain. And you would not know that a thing had happened. I mean, no one, everyone is just congregating and having fun and smiling and beaming and dancing around. And I think there's a tremendous sense of relief. And look, New York's in a better place than a lot of other places still in America, and certainly in Europe. I mean, we're over 70%, I think, now vaccinated, and people are behaving as such. Especially in Manhattan, especially in the venues that we have. I think, all our places are full and no one seems to be concerned. And it's nice to see after a year of being afraid to get in an elevator with somebody, because again, that's another thing that people out in other, we are so confined here, as our building has one elevator, so you pretty much no choice. You're going to be in an elevator with somebody. The subways were a little dicey a few months ago until I felt like I was double vaccinated. But right now, I think that there's kind of a pent up energy and that I've never witnessed really.
Wow. So, I know that there have been some hiring challenges in major markets, LA, New York.
That's really an understatement. That could be
Has
the
that
greatest.
Dissipated at all, David, or
No,
still really dealing with it?
It's terrible. It's terrible. And it's funny because, not to get too deep on this, but I'm a New York Times lover, but even yesterday they, just their bias, that it's only conservatives who think that that the this extra stipend is hurting getting hiring back. But it's not it's everyone I know in the restaurant business, liberal blue Democrat like me or conservative whatever like some of my friends, no Trumpers in that group, but we're all having the same issue. You can't hire anybody because a lot of people left. Imagine 3 young actresses living together in Brooklyn and one loses their job a year ago and says, I got to go home to my parents. Well, then that's a domino effect. The other 2 now can't afford the apartment because they were splitting it 3 ways. So they all had to leave. Sure. And, we have people who have straight up told me, look, I'm making 800 something a week. Plus I'm teaching, 8 yoga classes a week privately. And I don't have to get in the subway, and I'm not coming back to work till I need to come back to work. And it's logical for some people. So it's been really hard. And, when you get John George, who's, the king of hospitality, basically, and one of the nicest guys, when he's having to throw out $500 bonuses to get people to come work, groups like ours, which are, it's not like Lamb's Club, which has been around 11 years. A lot of these venues are new. We got all our staff back at Jimmy, no problem. But some of the new restaurants, Sona, we hired probably just before the real crisis hit. But so many restaurants opened in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I'd say, either new ones or ones that were just kind of waiting it out a little longer. they all opened at once. And so now we're at $1,000 offer for a signing bonus if you stay through September.
Wow.
It's crazy.
You know, David, I've talked about this a few times on this program with other folks in the industry, because we experienced this employee shortage in LA, years ago. I mean, this is not new. It got certainly accelerated as a result of COVID and the pandemic, but it's not a new condition. At least it was not in Los Angeles. We had a hard time finding folks. Mm-hmm. Do you see any long-term consequence here? Is there some model adjustment that needs to be made? Or you think this is just over time it will correct itself and more people will be in the market looking for work?
I mean, I remember when you were telling me you were having a hard time, and it was so interesting because it was something I had never even heard of. You said you were losing people to Uber, because they were actors auditioning and they could just turn the clock on and off in between auditions rather than commit to an 8-hour shift. That's not as much of a New York phenomenon because not as many people have cars. Everyone in LA has a car, mm-hmm. But the average 24-year-old living in Brooklyn trying to be an actor doesn't have a car. They're riding the subways. I do believe, and again, this could be foolish, but I believe as Broadway returns in the fall and as film production and TV production gets back to full steam, that a lot of those younger people who are either behind the camera or in front of the camera or hoping to be behind the camera or in front of the camera are going to come back to New York. And they're traditionally who work in our industry, as you know, and they're just everything shut down, right? I mean, which is why we don't have Lamb's Club open right now or Skylark, because there's no one in Midtown. In reference to what we were speaking about earlier, if you go below 23rd Street, New York looks normal. Or if you come up here on my neighborhood on the Upper West Side, your neighborhood on the Upper West Side, you would think nothing had ever happened. But if you go to 44th and Broadway at a certain hour of night, it's deserted, or it's just a different guest because there's no one going to theater. There's no business guys coming out of those skyscrapers. So yeah, no, I do think it'll come back, but I think I think that bigger brains than mine need to get together and figure out how to incentivize younger people to come back here sooner and fill these jobs.
Well, I know there's an election. By the time this program airs, it will have been decided, but it has not happened yet. And I do want to get your thoughts on that in a couple of minutes. But relative to the New York Times, there was an article, I think this past Sunday, just about the youth movement in New York and how many young folks now are kind of realizing for the first time that they can possibly afford an apartment in Manhattan that they could not afford prior. And even enrollment in local universities is up. Columbia is up over 50%. NYU is up over 20%. Supposedly, commercial rents are reflecting, some stagnation, if not a little bit of a dip, which is, something we have not seen ever, probably. And, that suggests that maybe there's going to be this revitalization through this youth movement of, this is their first go round, right? We were our first go round, maybe, both of us are I'm a little older than you, but we're both probably too young to really remember Studio 54 in its heyday. But certainly we followed, our nightlife.
Is we missed that, but Will was like 17 and going,
Right. Well, Will, still, of course.
Of course.
Every rope drop for Will Regan.
Regan.
But, places like Nell's, kind of defined our era of nightlife, right? Yes. And then, you, as I mentioned, you and Will opened Rex. I moved out west, did Roxbury. And so that was our time. So, in what's happened in the 20 years or so in between then and where we are now has certainly been interesting to watch the restaurant industry proliferate and celebrity chefs and mm-hmm. All these concepts and the growth that we've watched. But now we see, the youth movement, if there mm-hmm. truly is one. Do you think that that's real, David? Are you seeing young people in that kind of number?
I think it is real because of exactly what you spoke about. And I think there's a potential, nightlife kind of look, there's a lot of factors that have hurt nightlife, whether it's the festivalization of America, like every week there's something, right? Coachella, Lollapalooza, so I think a lot of people's focus turned to not necessarily being in nightlife in New York because they were so busy running around the country going to whatever sort of event floated their boat. But, if you think back to Area, which was really a groundbreaking club that Serge did with Eric, that could never happen.
Serge Becker, Eric
Good, yep. Right. But that could never have happened in the last 10 years because rents in Manhattan were so insane. But when they went to Tribeca, 25 years ago or 30 years ago and did area, and were so creative and so cutting edge, they probably were paying $10 a square foot or something. Sure. So the question is, are landlords going to be stuck with these large scale spaces that don't really have another use and make deals? And I think they will. And we'll create a few. It's funny, about 10, 12 years ago, Steve Lewis, who's sort of a legendary nightlife operator under Peter Gatien, and then he became designed a lot of clubs. And he used to have a column called Good Night, Mr. Lewis in Black Book, I think it was. And he said the new VIP is any jerk off at Morgan Stanley with a black card. And I thought he was ahead of his, I wasn't sure I agreed with him, but over the next few years, I realized he really was seeing it in advance, that, the VIPs to us were artists or musicians or models or designers or actors or whatever it may be, someone who was creating something, someone who was on the cutting edge of something that you wanted to learn from or be around or just hear what they had to say. And, then it got all warped in the early 2000s. And you could argue which came first, chicken or egg, but I would argue that rents got so high that operators had to cater to, guys making several $1 million a year who were willing to buy a table for $15,000. They just didn't care because it really didn't matter because their bonus was $3 million. And they'd buy a table and order, 20 bottles of Belvedere or whatever it was. Hopefully this will we never really went down that path. We don't do bottles. I mean, we don't not allow bottle service, but we don't advertise bottle service at any of our venues, specifically because we didn't want to be we didn't think that provided for longevity. And
that's got to be a tough, decision, because the staff that you have, if they can work down the street and earn 5 times as much because there's bottle service offered, you want to keep that great cocktail server and not lose.
I think, look, it was interesting when Lotus was at its peak. And then, of course, we suffered through 9/11 and we took a dip, as did the whole city. People were still going out to dinner, but they were not going dancing. It was not a celebratory mood for a long time. The city was very, kind of in mourning and didn't really know when was it okay to go have fun. You had to go eat a hamburger, but when was it okay to have fun? And it took a while for Lotus to come back, and knock on wood, we did. But a couple of years into that, a year or two after that, Marquee opened, and we lost about 10 of our best cocktail servers, but about 6 of them came back, and it was just attitudinal. There was some of them were just trying to make as much possible money in the shortest amount of hours they could, and were willing to deal with any kind of customer that was willing to spend $10,000 on a table. And some of them wanted more of this sort of homey atmosphere, if you can have a homey atmosphere in a nightclub. But I think it's funny, the Lotus crew is a really interesting group. There's 20 or 30 of them that treated almost the way you and I might treat our college roommates or buddies. They still get together for each other's birthdays. It was a very family-like atmosphere for a large venue. And they go to each other's kids' birthdays and their aunts and uncles or their godmother and godfather to their. So a lot of them came back because they were like, yeah, I could make a little more money over there, but I'm so happy here and my friends are here. And I think it's harder as you get more places going to foster that family atmosphere. But I would say that, for example, my partner Maneesh at Sona is just a wonderful guy. And, someone said something to us the other day. I said, I feel like I'm kind of more the uncle there and he's the dad, because, I'm running around, I'm popping in for an hour here, an hour there, because I'm on my, literally on a city bike running around Manhattan saying, checking in at the places. And that's the interesting thing about the pandemic you didn't ask about, which I'll tell you if you want to hear it in a minute. But please. I'm checking in on the places, and Maneesh is there for 4 or 5 hours, and I can see the love that the staff have for him, because he's there for them every night. He's giving them a hug, hello, and he's an amazing dude. And I miss that aspect of when Will and I only had Lotus, and we were kind of there every day and knew everyone's name, knew their wife's name, knew their mom's problems, whatever. We're not in that situation. But what I was going to say is what's been hard for me, and it's a good problem to have, is the pandemic changed, and I don't know if it did it in other cities, but it changed people's eating habits. Everyone is eating earlier. New Yorkers were famous for being willing to eat at 9:30, 10 o'clock. That was no big thing, right? 9:30 reservation, then go out wherever you're going out. I think a combination of first having to eat home every night, and then New York was a 10 o'clock curfew for so long that people didn't want to be rushed out before dessert. And they haven't really readjusted to the the time change. So everyone is trying, people who you and I would think would want to eat at 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever, they all want to eat between 6:30 and 8. So what it's done for me, oddly enough, is put me in this crazy time crunch where I'm trying to figure out, well, do I go to American Bar? Do I go to Sona? Do I go to Veranda? How do I get between one and the other in a short enough period of time that I can at least say hello to my friends who are in each place? So as I said, it's a good problem to have, but it's strange. It's phenomenon. I mean, when we were, as you mentioned, when we were doing in the Nels days or whatever, I would go to dinner at this restaurant, Espace, that used to be on 16th Street at 9:30. We had a standing Thursday night reservation at 9:30 because we didn't want to be done till midnight because there was no sense what we're going to do at 11. You had to be done at midnight so you could go to Nels at 12:15. So we'll see if that comes back. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely building up, a nice network of people to work with you, in terms of partners that add real value. But it does, your point does make me think about, one of the dilemmas of this business, because I know enough about you to know that, you really are a people person, and being in that room, not only just for I think it gives you a certain amount of pleasure, of course, but the people that are going there, they want to see you, they want to know that David's going to be there that night. But the real life economic challenges of staying in one room as an operator are just they're not favorable. Kind of have to have more than one revenue stream, right? And is that a dilemma for you, or is it something that you readily embrace these days?
No, I mean, I think it's both. I mean, you're right. In New York City, it's almost impossible to have one revenue source that you could just rely on, especially because if that one were to take a turn for the bad, and for some whatever combination of reasons, a famous chef might leave or whatever it may be. If you have no backup, you have no backup. So, and the places that we have are different enough that I think it's fair, and I hope my partners, because they're not all the same partners, feel that it's fair that I'm at one place one night, but I'm mentioning the other venues, saying, you should check out Veranda, or you've been here at Sona 3 times, come check out American Bar. And each place has a great on-the-ground partner. So that's an advantage. What we learned when we did Union Bar, is so funny because Will was so smart, as you know, and was sort of ahead of the curve. And, at Rex, it was very dependent on he and I being there. And we got, that's a little gets tied up with your ego a little bit. Like, and then, of course, in Manhattan Express in Moscow, we built this crazy business in Russia in 1993 and 4. But we came back and we did Union Bar, and for like 3 weeks, it had all the usual suspects coming. But it was a glass front bar on Park Avenue South, and our inner core guest stopped coming, but it was packed. And I said to Will one day, I said, "Wow, it's so weird. Like, our friends aren't really coming here anymore." And he goes, "Are you kidding? It's the greatest thing's ever happened to us." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We don't have to be here." Wow. He said, He's like, "We are not tied to this room. People don't really care if they find you or not." And then, stupidly or not, we had our Godfather 3 moment and went back and did Lotus.
Godfather 3.
And, got pulled back into it when we thought we were out.
Right.
But, obviously that led to a lot of great things for us. So I did zero regrets. Yeah. It was a wonderful time to do it. But, some of our venues right now, I know everybody, and some of them, look, I can walk into the Skylark on like you said about Lamb's. Lunch at Lamb's is people who come 3 times a week, and, I know almost all of them by first name. I know their guests often. So I can't wait for that to get back open. But the Skylark, which is 5 blocks away, on a nice Thursday, we'll see literally 1,000 people through the door on a nice spring Thursday, and I might know 10. They're there because it's a great venue on a nice block with insane views, and we did a nice job on the build out and amazing cocktails, and they're not really worried about David Rabin. They may not know who I am at all, and that's fine.
That's fine with you.
I'll put that on the shelf. It's good.
Segue to your operating model, David, because it's really evolved over the time that I've watched you in this industry. And from the early days, obviously, with you and Will just kind of bootstrapping and learning the business real time and making adjustments along the way to what you've kind of created for yourself as an operating model now. where, you've surrounded yourself with the Jeff Kadishes of the world, and Kyle, I think, is your partner in American Bar.
They're both great. Yeah,
Right.
Kyle and Jeff
Both
are great.
Yep. Bring a lot to the table.
Yep.
But you don't really fit like the typical restaurateur, model. You've kind of expanded it and morphed it into your own version of, what I think you do exceptionally well is curate an experience, and I guess restaurateurs do that as well. But I don't know, does any of that land for you? It feels a little more unique than what I would think of as the traditional definition of restaurateur.
When Will decided in 2000, we were married at the hip, basically, having gone to college together and then done all these things together. And when he decided in 2012 about to leave the business, sort of half my brain exited the room along with him. In terms of, Will was a Wall Street trader, very successful one. His brain just works in numbers faster than anyone I've ever met. He's great on construction. He's great on understanding build outs, a lot of stuff that I'm not great at. And so I sort of got forced into improvising and making alliances that seemed to fit whatever the right project was. And then just by great happenstance, Jimmy was, knock on wood, extremely successful. And the owner of the building where the Skylark is approached me just as a friend of a friend to take a look at it. That morphed from an initial just conversation where I thought that his business model or the business model of his potential operator was off base, into him offering me the space. And one of the things I said in the meeting was I wouldn't even open on weekends. And he's like, he was kind of completely like, what? And I said, yeah, this is such an amazing venue and Midtown is empty on weekends. I would do it as an event space. And when he called me back a few days later after he had digested everything, he said, look, I just met a guy named Jim Kirsch, son of Abigail Kirsch, which is, arguably the best catering and event company in New York. Would you consider chatting with him and maybe doing a JV? And Jim is amazing, and his company's amazing, and we formed this joint venture to do, me sort of handling the bar lounge sort of side of things and him handling all the events, and they do all the back of house, which is what I was missing once Will, left the business. I had no one to turn to for HR, accounting, all those issues, and so it's become such a fruitful partnership that now they're my partners at Modernhaus in both Veranda and Jimmy, and we're prospectively doing 2 to 3 more projects together. So a lot of it's happy accident, and if anything, one of the lessons is go to the meeting, for me, because I only walked over from Lamb's Club to the Skylark build out site because a mutual friend sort of asked me, please, my friend is building this rooftop and he's getting a little nervous. He just wants someone else to eyeball it. I'm like, the friend was such a good friend of mine that I said, sure, I'm happy to go talk to him for a few minutes, having no idea that it was going to lead to, one of the most important things that, for my personal portfolio in terms of it's, the Skylark itself, and then what it's led to in terms of a partnership.
I really admire your instinct, David, and your intellect. You're a humble guy, but you're clearly really intelligent. You're one of the smartest guys I know. But you're also able to apply a certain sense of aesthetic, both when it comes to design, the right concept for the right space and the right people for the right venue. And I think it's a really unique skill set to have those things blend together so effortlessly as they seem to do for you. Do you feel like you're you've got to feel like you're kind of in that sweet spot right now where things are really clicking and your talents really, I think, are being showcased?
It's a strange, going from a year ago where I was sitting on the couch wondering if we were ever really going to work again to really was. Right. Not, to now having these places that are all, quite beautiful and all doing really, really well. And I hope that continues, is gratifying. I think what I've been able to do is identify talent who led to other talent, in the sense that I asked around a lot as Will was leaving the business and some of the partners from Lotus were leaving New York. And I found a lot of people pointed me in the direction of Kyle, who's got an amazing aesthetic sense, far superior to mine. And he located a designer that we've now used both on American Bar, but then I suggested her for Sona and for Veranda, and she just knocked it out of the park. one of my favorite places that we ever did was the Double Seven, which was this beautiful small cocktail bar across the street from Lotus. And it's funny, I was in LA probably visiting you, which was one of my favorite things to do, and until you left me for Florida. And every place we went to around that time was it seemed to be designed by this guy, Dodd Mitchell.
Right.
And I was like, I got to find this guy. Because there's nothing that feels like this in New York at the time. I think the one I liked the most was called Dolce. Mm-hmm. And there was just a vibe to it that I was like, no one's doing this in New York. And luckily, my friend Teresa knew him very well. You know Teresa. And because he wasn't calling me back. And she said, I know Dodd, he'll call me. And sure enough, one thing led to another. He designed the Double Seven. We teamed up with, and yeah, like that. That's a good example. I mean, I'm not good on compliments, but I'll accept the compliment in that case. That I thought that, bringing Dodd to New York for that, and then I had just recently met Sasha Petrasky, who really kind of brought classic cocktails back with milk and honey, and we had developed a nice rapport. And I was like, look, I think if with our crowd that Lotus had, that sort of, for lack of a better phrase, the Vogue-ish crowd of Lotus, if they saw a Dodd Mitchell design in a small, intimate environment with cocktails by Sasha, when these guys are used to just having cranberry and soda, or cranberry and vodka, I think will blow people away. And we did. It hadn't really been done. And that was sort of when we started this whole idea, because people asked me, well, what is it? And I really wasn't sure what to call it. So I kind of said it's nightlife for grownups. Mm-hmm. And it was not meant as a chronological thing. It was just meant as a mindset. I mean, you could be 24 or you could be 54. And you've had a nice dinner and you want to go out.
Talk to somebody and hear what they have to say.
You want to talk to somebody, but you want to hear that beat in the background.
Yeah.
I'll never forget and it was quite an accident, but you walked Bill Withers in after he won some Lifetime Achievement Award, and our DJ happened to be playing Lovely Day as he came down the hallway. And he's like, oh, you didn't have to do that for me. I'm like, Mr. Withers, we are so honored to have you here, but we didn't do it for you. That's what we play here.
It's a rock and roll Hall of Fame.
That's what we play here, and we're just so kind of freaked out that you're actually here. But yeah, that was the vibe. Was like, how do you create a little head bopping moment, and, for people, but they could hear their friends speak. And look, if they wanted to go to a big club, God bless. That wasn't what we were doing, and it was kind of the same mentality we did in Vegas with the Dorsey. Was when Rob Goldstein asked me to come out and look around Vegas, I said, look, Rob, every hotel has these 5,000 person, gigantic nightclubs with DJs that are making a couple $100,000 to spin. No one's doing a cool, grown-up, adult, sexy, bar playing old school funk and soul and hip hop and classics and amazing cocktails. I think you could create something that no one else is doing. And he bought into it, and the hotel bought into it, and the Dorsey was born, and it's worked out so well. They did 2 more. So look, you gotta know what your lane is and kind of stay in it, and maybe you deviate a little bit. But my lane is certainly not doing any more these big giant nightclubs with people dancing on tables. That was a period.
But David, I want to walk through virtually anyway the places that you have now. As I mentioned, they're getting acclaim. Sona just got a great review from Pete Wells in the New York Times. But before I do that, when I moved to LA, there was a certain sense that I had that the New York rep meant, that I was going to bring something that LA had not had at that time. And over the 30 years that I spent in Los Angeles, and you spent a lot of time out there and a lot of time with me, and as you mentioned, discovered Dodd Mitchell's work and saw other things that you like. I saw where things now or had become interchangeable between New York and LA, stylistically, aesthetically, concept-wise. Would you agree with that? I mean, I know you're friends with people like Jeff Klein who are doing.
Well, I was just going to say,
Bungalow is fantastic. I mean,
I was actually, when you were saying that, I was going to say, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, and then you get a guy with an amazing. I was literally like, as you were speaking, thinking, and then you get someone like Jeff Klein who changes the vibe in the sense that I still I like have a calling to Sunset Tower Bar when I'm there. I want to eat a steak frite at the bar, or if you're there, I want to sit down at a nice dark corner table with you and catch up in this amazing room and realize, oh shit, 2 tables away is a good friend of ours, and we didn't even notice because it's dim and it's cool and it's sexy, and he's got the guy on the bass and the music's not overbearing at all. And then he goes and turns a former bathhouse into this beautiful, private club. So his vision and the beauty that he and the time he puts into the design, I think is so admirable, and I'm such a fan. So I think there is crossover, but I also think people in New York are doing, I think our designer, Melissa Bowers, who's done a few projects for us, she was formerly the design director for the Faena, which is, incredible in Miami. And we were just dumb lucky that Kyle brought her into our mix. And then, she had the time to do Sona and Veranda, and she's got a distinctive style, but she's varied it across, and she's redoing Temple Bar for us, which is, a project we're super excited about for September.
Wow. That's incredible. That's a legendary space. I can't wait.
God,
so talk to us a little bit about Sona, man. What an incredible concept. The room, I've read where Pete Wells said, when you're in the dining room, you're bathed in this amazing light. I'm like, David knows good lighting when he sees it. But it sounds like an incredible spot, man. I can't wait to see it. Just tell us a little bit about Sona, Veranda, and American Bar, if you would.
I'll do the quickie as best I can. Sona was really the came out of the brain of my partner Maneesh Goyal, who was in the event marketing business, but his dad had the first and only Indian restaurant in Texas in 1975, and Maneesh always wanted to sort of pay homage to his dad, and also he really wanted to make Indian food more culturally relevant in New York than he thought it was. Certainly there's some great Indian restaurants in New York, both on the high end and the low end. But Maneesh's dream, and the way that when he approached me about it, which I thought was so relevant, was like, no one's really done for Indian food what Indochine did for Asian food, or what Nobu did many years ago for sushi, or what, let's say, Cosme has done for Mexican food, which is make it sort of, for lack of a better phrase, chic and feel New York and feel like a cool night out, in addition to having incredible cuisine. And I think we've accomplished that. The room is beautiful. Melissa did an incredible job. Priyanka helped a lot, to be honest, with sort of a vibe and a muse, sort of as our muse with it.
It's Priyanka Chopra.
It is. Who's a good friend of Manish's. And I've become friendly with her, but I don't want to take credit for that. Manish brought her in. They're very close friends. In fact, her husband, Nick Jonas, named Sona over lunch. It means beautiful in Punjabi and gold in Hindi. And it was a perfect name. It's, even if you didn't know what the background was, Sona just, it sounds right, it looks great in graphics. So the food is tremendous by this wonderful guy a very humble guy named Hari Nayak, and everyone else in the kitchen is really right off the boat from India and living in Jersey City as of February. So it's really a wonderful place, and I've learned a lot as Upper West Side Jew eating burgers and bagels and lox. I'm starting to eat Indian food a lot more, and it's delicious, and really woke me up to a whole new sort of flavor palette that I didn't have. Veranda's with a very well-known chef named George Mendes, a Michelin-starred chef, who's used to have a Portuguese restaurant for 10 years called Aldeia, and he just, as you would understand, got tired of the grind of running his own restaurant by himself. It was very successful, but it was a small restaurant, and it required him to do everything. And he was like, look, I just want to cook again. I want to cook, visit my tables, go home to my family. I don't want to worry about the plumbing or the HR. And so we were able to provide him that. And the Sits from Floor Equity, who bought the James and turned it into Modernhaus, really just went over the top with this build out, because the whole restaurant is under this removable glass pergola. So we can be a completely indoor or outdoor restaurant at the touch of a button, really. And then American Bar is, in many ways, sort of an homage to Jeff Klein and Sunset Tower Bar, and to Ralph Lauren and Polo Bar. And, Kyle and I, always just loved Sunset Tower and loved Polo Bar, and thought that there was nothing really in the Village that had all those dishes that you just love. And, you might find one or two of them at a restaurant, but you've never been presented with all 12 of them or all 18 of them right in front of you. And it's the kind of place you could almost eat every night. And we have a few people who eat 4 nights a week at American Bar, and God bless them. And then we got Jimmy back open, which is great, because being that it's 60% outdoor space, people feel really good about being up there. And for me, I get a kick out of it because, really interesting people have been coming up lately, and, bad name drop alert, because this has been his week, but Anthony Ramos came up twice in the last week, before and after the premiere of In the Heights. And he's
I know Idris has spun there.
Idris has spun there. Yeah, that was kind of surreal when his friend asked me if he could spin there, and I kind of looking at my phone like, you don't mean Idris Elba, right? Like we can't afford Idris Elba. And she said, no, he just likes to spin, to sort of take the edge off when he's doing multiple interviews. And he's now done it like 4 or 5 times. He's fantastic and nicest guy. And you'll appreciate this because of Bryce and how we both feel about our sons. The last time he was in, it was a crowded party, and he was so far away, I couldn't even really get to him without having to step over 40 people. And he just kind of waved, and I waved. I don't know him well, but we waved it. And I could see him mouth to me, "How's your son?" Because he had met Tyler. And I mean, like, what kind of dude is that, right? Like, one of these big movie stars, doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, and his first words out of his mouth are, "How's your son doing?" And I was like, this dude is too much. So, it's very rewarding.
And Tyler is pretty memorable.
He's a good dude. He's a great kid. I don't know if he enjoyed being home from college this much, but I certainly enjoyed having him around.
Well, on that note, David, I want to just quickly, before we run out of time, a couple of things left here. But I did want to mention that, you have what we call these days a blended family. Your wife is Nikki. She's beautiful, an old friend. She happens to be African-American. Tyler is a mix of you both, a beautiful, beautiful young man, and as smart as he can be. He's an incredible writer, and I think he's going to do some pretty cool stuff. But this has always seemed to come natural to you. Diversity was not anything that you seemed to have to be told about or taught about. Just seems innate in your character. Your friends, you've got the most diverse palette of friends of anyone that I know. You're, as I mentioned before, you're an amazing social connector. But all of this just seems, just really natural to you. There's nothing forced. Your places are always fully representative of a diverse spectrum: gay, straight, black, white, yellow, purple.
I'm not happy. Well, 2 things, 3 things. Thanks. Because it is very important to me, but it's not deliberate or intentional. It's just how you're right. It's just been my whole life, because I think a big part of it is my parents, because my dad went to a Quaker college and had two lifelong friends, one of whom has since passed away, but one was a Quaker guy who had grown up in Pennsylvania, and the other was a black guy named Ed Lee, who I knew from the moment I was born. He and his wife and his kids, who were pretty much my age, and they were just always at our house. And so it just never even, I actually thought Ed was my uncle, until I was 3 or 4, because he was there so much. And like, we call each other uncle, fooling around. And I really do feel that way, obviously, as does Tyler, and I hope does Bryce. But I really did think Ed Lee was my uncle until my parents explained that he wasn't, but he was there so much in my life. And my parents were involved in the civil rights movement in Long Island, where we, as people would move to neighborhoods that were traditionally white neighborhoods and get some guff for it, my parents would, try to help. And it just was always part of my life. And meeting Nikki was certainly never intentional. It was just the social circle we were in. Is we could each name the 50, 60 people that were in our circle when we were single and moving around New York. It was a very diverse group of people who no one really seemed to care at all about race or background or anything, sexuality even. No one cared about any of that stuff. And it's very rewarding to see that Tyler's generation could care less than we cared. And Tyler, Nikki's half Filipino, half black. So Tyler's truly a mutt. He's got everything in him, and his friends the same. And it's kind of wonderful. But you're right. I am not happy, and our managers know it. I'm not happy when I walk into any one of our places. It's too much of anything. Right. I think that our place's strength is when they're reflective of the diversity of New York. And if I walk in, it doesn't matter if it's all white, wrong. If it's all black, wrong. If it's all gay, wrong. If it's all straight, wrong. It's got to feel like the melting pot that is New York. Otherwise, it's not interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think, any place, and I'm sure that a hotel group is going to come knocking soon, but if they haven't already, but any place that gets David Rabin, that's what you bring. Your core audience, as you described, that I was part of and continue to be part of from the 80s, has grown into this network of people that are doing some amazing things and cross section, racially, gender. It's really beautiful, man, and I love it, and I look forward to of course seeing you every time I'm in the city or when you come to LA. But I also really, really enjoy being in the spaces that you create. So Uncle Adam Katz and I will have to drop in on you next time in New York. You mentioned a couple of places that you have coming up. You're redoing Temple Bar. Tell us about what's on the horizon and how you found more days and hours in a week to do even more.
I don't think I have more days and hours. And as you know, I'm trying to do stuff in your old town as well, in a completely different vein. So I'm trying to save some time for that as well. But Temple Bar was just one of those moments that something comes along and you can't not do it. For those people who don't know it, it was a small, people consider it almost a downtown Bemelman's, or it's this beautiful 75-person bar that never had a sign ever, just had a crocodile cut out on the front. It's on Lafayette, just near Bleecker. It was behind a restaurant called NoHo Star. And the owner passed away of old age, I don't know, I think in his 80s a few years ago. And as we were hunting for Sona, or for a space that would handle the Indian restaurant, a broker said, well, also just want to mention Temple Bar's available. We were like, what? And so, as I mentioned earlier, I had gotten lucky in Vegas and met with, took me all the way in Vegas to meet the mentees of Sasha, if you will, Sam Ross and Michael from Attaboy. And when Maneesh and I stumbled across Temple Bar, I said, look, if we really want to do this next level and not just fake it, as great a place as it is, it'll be even greater if we have the guys who run the top 5 bar every year in the world as our partners. And he was all into that because they're great guys, and he was way into it. So we hope, look, as you know, Brad, the alchemy on paper always sounds good. You never know until you shake it up and deliver it to the people, and they tell you, yeah, this is great, or no, this really kind of sucks. Like, you just don't know. We're not going to do a major revamp. We're going to clean everything up and, new furniture, new rugs, and then have this amazing team, and hopefully New York will be ready for it. We're actually going to hold it. It could open in August, but as you know, August is not a strong month to open in New York. So we're going to hold it till September, when we think people will be, hopefully, really coming back to New York.
And maybe Fashion Week returns.
Fashion Week, there's the US Open. September's a weird month in New York, as you know, because it's a deceptively great month. Like, it looks like it's going to be great, and then the Jewish holidays hit, and a lot of people, go back underground, basically. So it's really October when New York is in full force, but you get a good 10-day burst there between the tail end of the US Open and Fashion Week. And I think Fashion Week is probably going to have a lot of pent-up demand as well, because they've been they've had to do it all virtually for a year and a half. So I think they're going to come out hard this year.
Right. Speaking of fashion, I've been watching a few episodes of Halston on Netflix, and it helped me to revisit I wasn't there in those days, but see Studio 54 in the early days, and just the excess and the craziness that was going on then. But, David, I think you are certainly emerging, as I know you consider yourself a team player, and I think you are a great teammate. But I think you are emerging as one of the best operators in the country. And I'm really looking forward to continue to watch you grow and develop and visit the places that you have coming online. And I would encourage anybody that listens to this podcast, when they visit New York, to hit David's spots. I guarantee you, we have not misrepresented here. Everything we say, you will experience and enjoy. So anyway, David, it's been great to see you. Great talking to you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. Did I miss anything? Anything you need to tell us?
I think you covered it all. Just I'm so pleased to spend time with you, even if it's with headphones on. I can't wait to see you in person. It's been way too long.
Yeah, me too, man.
Way too long.
Thanks so much, David. Take care.
All right, Uncle Brad. Talk to you soon.
See you soon. So here we are, this part of the program called How We Move with my dear friend, Ambassador Shabazz. So David Rabin is getting some stuff done in New York City as the city starts to emerge and come back. David is leading the charge for nightlife. Love that guy, generous, insightful, bright. Yeah. What was your take?
Well, I'm not surprised though. As long as I've known David Rabin, and I know him mostly through you a couple of decades ago in restaurants in and out and around, always a kind of paradigm shifter. But what was most significant to hear as we're all maturing and aging and everyone gets to reflect is that he has a really special operating model, and it always includes people. And that's what's important. I think that's what we're getting a chance to hear about with leaders in the industry in this last year, that it's not just about the brick and mortar, it's about all the souls that come in and out and his role in that context. And so the social impact hospitality space is really important. And it's not even where one starts. It's not even what you thought you were going into, but it does speak to the person he is, and I have found that when you're reading various headlines, hospitality and social impact managers become one of the points of HR or the hiring process. And another one I saw was sustainability in hospitality, why it's important and how industry leaders can help. This is where we are. So now it goes back to what we talked about earlier some time back, where hospitality is not just business, it's the way of life. It's the courtesy, it's the consideration. And what I'm really proud about, in my grandmother's country of Grenada, there's a young brother named Barry Collymore, who has become the new board chair for the Grenada Tourism Authority and the founder of the West Indies School of Hospitality, which the acronym is WISH. And if you go online, you can go to wish.com. And they've done an alliance with a number of donors, one a prominent resort owner there in Grenada from Egypt, he is. But they have now over 5,000 scholarships for potential and existing employees in hospitality for an e-commerce course with Cornell.
Wow.
Cornell University, 5,000. So I had a brief conversation, and I keep reading about it, hearing about it. We're going to do a deep dive in a minute. But I love the fact that he's involved, that he's in charge, and that he's sharing and he's connecting dots, and he's making sure people in and around him are empowered. And you have to be empowered with a little bit more engagement with the academic, with the certification, with the training, and how it impacts the population. Really wonderful.
Interesting, because there's as we've heard a few of the operators, hospitality operators and chefs that we've had on the show, there's been a real hiring challenge going on domestically, just having a hard time. A lot of people left the field and have not come back yet, and there's a real worker shortage. So, any kind of a training program, be it in the islands or wherever, it would be nice to maybe make some connections with that gentleman and some of the recruiters here in the States, because there are a lot of jobs right now that the hospitality industry needs to fill.
And the service industry is really very, very key. So I would just like other ways that we're able to refer people online, just go to wishgrenada.com, and that's the West Indies School of Hospitality. And I'm really proud of them, because in short time, this is the movement that he is assuring, and that other people are also the beneficiaries of such as.
Fantastic. The Spice Island.
The Spice Island. That's exactly. And for real, right? So it's not just on your palate. It's the thing that, you can apply topically. I've given you some of that nutmeg. Yeah, that nutmeg.
It not just smells great, it actually works. It soothes the muscles.
It actually works. Well, we actually have tried it, and every now and then you go, well, is that a placebo? Am I thinking it's working? But it's actually working.
As long as the net result is the same, I don't care, right?
That's right. That's
Ambassador Shabazz, How We Move, just like that. Thank you.
Just like that. Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Corner Table Talk is hosted by Brad Johnson, produced by Brad and Linda Ailes Johnson. Theme music, Life Goes On by Bryce Vine. Executive producer, Ken Johnson. Find the Corner Table Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Corner Table Talk is a Mean Old Lion Media production.